they were kind of part of a growing underbelly in parts of London and also Leicestershire, where essentially young men are enticed by the violence and the kind of the grimy underworld of telegram posts.
Three British men have been found guilty of an arson attack on a London warehouse linked to Ukraine on behalf of the Wagner Group. Around £1 million worth of damage was caused by the blaze at an industrial unit in Leighton, East London, that was supplying Starlink satellite equipment to Ukraine. Candace Rondeaux is Senior Director of the think tank Future Frontlines and author of Putin's Sledgehammer, the Wagner Group and Russia's Collapse into Mercenary Chaos, and is an expert on the group. You may remember she was our Newsmaker Thursday night interview a couple of months ago. Candace, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back.
Thanks so much for being with us. And I know that you attended, didn't you, the trial of these three British men when we saw you last. Just tell us a little bit more about the background. How was the Wagner Group, able to recruit these three British men?
Yeah, it's an extraordinary case, although I suspect it is not isolated. There are other indications that Wagner has been recruiting individuals, particularly with criminal backgrounds in other parts of Europe as well. But in this instance, the Wagner Group used a Telegram bot named Privyet bot or Hello bot to entice a young man named Dylan Earl, who has, I believe, pleaded guilty to being involved in espionage and supporting Wagner sabotage operations. It turns out Earl was one of several men who was local to London or the London area, who have been involved in sabotage attacks, not only on this warehouse, which was an arson case in East London and Leighton, but also targeting restaurants and businesses in Mayfair, including potentially kidnapping a Russian emigre who has been very vocal as a critic of Vladimir Putin and the war in Ukraine.
And a timeline wise, this was going on when only a couple of years ago, wasn't it? I'm trying to find the exact year here, but it's basically relates to an instance in March last year. Forgive me, sorry, I was just trying to put a date on it. And so what this brings into reality is that, the Wagner Group is still operating widely and is keen to recruit who do they look for when they try and find people to carry out terrorist acts in their name?
Yeah, this case is really interesting. Just the timing, as you noted, Kate, just March 2024, I was sort of doing some digging myself and looking at what was happening at the time. We had just the beginnings of preparations just a couple months before the Kursk offensive, where Ukrainian forces forced their way across the border into Russia. There was, in March of 2024, a suspected Russian jamming attack on the defense minister of the United Kingdom, as well as several different incidents that looked to be like drone flights. So there was a lot of activity going on in terms of Russia kind of extending the territorial boundaries of the war beyond Ukraine. And this incident unfolded against that backdrop, where these young men, most of whom appeared to be really struggling financially, had a long history of involvement in crime, although only a few of them had brushes with the law prior to this. It seemed like they were kind of part of a growing underbelly in parts of London and also Leicestershire, where essentially young men are enticed by the violence and the kind of the grimy underworld of telegram posts, which of course included, actually, interestingly, a Telegram channel called Violent Weddings, which is a bit of a sort of stew of kind of pornographic, sadistic snuff uploads that seem to be a crossover point for at least a couple of the folks who were involved in this incident in Leighton. And of course, Telegram has been wildly popular with Wagner Group followers, whether they're real members of the Wagner Group or wannabe members. Telegram has often been a big platform for enticing recruitment not just in the UK, but all across Ukraine, and has been very popular for even mobilizing forces just prior to the opening of the Ukraine war in 2022.
Yeah, and look, the motivation would be money.
Well, the motivation was definitely money. In this instance, for the Leighton warehouse, this so-called Privyet bot, the hello bot, which I think we can widely assume, generally assume that is probably run by somebody in Russia's GRU intelligence wing, promised £5,000 for just setting the warehouse on fire, and then several thousand pounds more for attacking and kidnapping this Russian emigre in Mayfair and burning down his businesses. In one case, it was suggested that they might pay a little extra if there was a so-called boom. Indicating that perhaps the plan was to actually firebomb both the restaurant and the wine shop in Mayfair
Yeah.
owned by this Russian emigre.
I don't want to make light of it, but that doesn't seem like an awful lot of money, does it? In the sort of wider context, I mean, these petty criminals, as they were, will be presumably serving a jail term. Sentencing isn't until the autumn, but that seems like an awful lot to risk being associated with Russia, as well as the danger to human life and everything else involved with that warehouse fire, and potentially what could have happened if they kidnapped someone and burned down those two Mayfair restaurants. It doesn't seem like, and please do not take light of this, but it doesn't seem like the Wagner Group pay that much for someone's
No, in fact,
potential
no, that's quite
grievance.
right. I mean, it is, I don't want to make light of it, but it is very striking that just, for what ultimately added up to about maybe £30,000 on offer via cryptocurrency, these young men were willing to target, three businesses, all of which had, some sort of tie to supporting, humanitarian aid to Ukraine, all of which had some sort of, logistics, purpose within support to Ukraine. And it was actually noted even in some of their Telegram conversations that they thought the price was rather low. There was some dispute between the Telegram bot and one of the perpetrators about the cost of kidnapping and the risks involved. But what I think was on offer was, or at least I think what was enticing to some of the suspects in this case, was the idea that there would be more coming. In fact, the bot seemed to suggest that one of the chief perpetrators, Dylan Earl, could foment his own social movement, his own sort of underground brigade that would be targeting Western interests, not only in the UK, but also in Europe. And Earl compensated by saying, yeah, I can help you out with that. I've got contacts everywhere. So he was sort of a wannabe criminal mastermind, but obviously didn't really understand the price, not only in terms of money, but in terms of years now likely to be spent in prison as a result of his crimes.
Look, really interesting to speak to you again. Candace Rondeaux, thank you. Senior Director of the think tank Future Frontline and author of Putin's Sledgehammer, the Wagner Group and Russia's Collapse into Mercenary Chaos, giving us the rundown there when Wagner has infiltrated the UK and a gang of petty criminals. It's fascinating, isn't it? And also slightly worrying, but it looks like justice will be done. Thank you to Candace.